What's going on, everyone? It is the big, just about launch Samsung event going on. Good to see you've got some people here in the chat. My name's Mike. I'm with Go Cell Phone Repair, and every week we talk about technology. Some of it's phone, some of it's not. Some interesting, just so many crazy things going on right now that I seriously had a hard time getting this down to 6 topics because we only have an hour. We spend 10 minutes roughly on each one, and I had at least a dozen things that I believe that are worth speaking about, but I don't have 2 hours to do today, so I narrowed it down. I did cut a few things off of here. What the obvious one, of course, is the Galaxy Note 9 launch. I'm sure there are lots of people excited about that. I'm curious to know if anyone has or is planning on ordering one of those. Also, smart assistants creating new openings for hackers. We kind of figured this might happen. And not only that, but Homeland Security has found vulnerabilities in US cell phones, not Chinese cell phones, but US cell phones that people are using probably as we speak, I would assume. The Army buying anti-drone microwave cannons. Oh yeah, this is 2018. We're definitely living in the science fiction future already, except it's not fiction anymore. Boston Dynamics about to unleash their killer robot dogs on the public next year, 2019, or something like that. Just bizarre stuff. And the craziest one of all, and this is not exactly technology, but kind of is. I think it needs to be spoken about, though. Doctors furious over Italy repealing a law that was basically requiring children to become vaccinated. So yeah, that is going to be actually already is a problem. Definitely want to talk about that. Let's get to it. Hey, Nate, glad to see you could join us. I actually had a question for you. That iPad that we were talking about, I wasn't sure what model that was, so I'm curious to know. And then I have kind of a theory that maybe would help to diagnose it if you haven't already figured it out. So I'm curious about that. I think we've only got like a 10-second lag today here. Johnny, how you been, man? Did not see you on Monday. There was a few people that weren't in here, and I was surprised that I didn't see on Monday. I've been trying to do eBay sales with used phones, but haven't been selling well. Any suggestions? Oh, Tyler, that's kind of a big one. We'll definitely talk about that in just a second. Okay, iPad Air 2. Okay, so 2 things. Nate, what I'm wondering, and I've been seeing these iPad Airs just die for no apparent reason. We go in, change the TriStar, the charge port, and I've actually had some iPad Air 2s doing some strange things also. As far as I can tell, those have ended up being NAND related, but I'm not sure if that's the same for the one that you're working with. But what I'm wondering about here is the way that we use, test resistance on various lines inside of the logic board itself. I'm wondering if maybe, and this might be something that works or somebody's already talked about doing, or maybe not. Maybe I'm going down the wrong track here. But could we not use resistance mode measurements on the components that surround the TriStar, the power management chip, and so forth, and kind of compare those to one that is working and possibly narrow that down and figure out where the problem is? Because that's generally the big challenge, right? Is figuring out what it is the problem is, where it's coming from, isolating that. And if there's heat, you can always look for a short, of course, but if there's no heat, then we really don't know what it is. And it sounds like something is turning off from what you described. So just an idea I thought I'd float out there. Initially I was thinking maybe pull the TriStar off again and take some measurements on those contacts underneath, but instead if you just trace those out to surrounding components, you could get that data the same way. And I think that maybe by comparing those, the same way that we would do on a connector, we might be able to find out if there's more or less resistance on a particular line, and then that might help you to chase that one down. That's just a thought that I was having. Hey, what's going on, Greg M? So Tyler, selling used phones on eBay, a couple of suggestions as to selling them. This is just a general rule. I've sold phones on eBay before, much more successfully in the past. If you're selling something like an iPhone or a late model Android, specifically a Samsung, you'll usually find that the prices don't vary too much. There's pretty much, a market for a certain phone at a certain price, and that's what they're worth. Probably the best tip I can give for eBay sales is, number one, take a photo of the actual item that you're selling. This is something that I found that helped me a lot, because a lot of people who are selling in volume, they'll use a stock photo And I can't say why, but I can tell you personally, when I go to buy something on eBay, if I see a stock photo and it says, condition is used, some blemishes and so forth, I have no idea what that item actually looks like. So obviously it takes a little extra effort to do that. But number one, taking a photo of the phone itself, and of course taking high quality photos, because if it's blurry, you can't see all the blemishes and things like that. And one thing that I kind of learned back when I was selling a lot of stuff on eBay, especially phones, is that I would almost try to show the worst thing about the device, period. So if there was a dent, crack in the screen, if it looks like there was a lot of wear and tear on it, I would take close-up macro photos of those, put that and literally feature the flaws and say, here's what's wrong with it, this, and this, because that way when the person gets the item, they can't complain, they can't say it was misrepresented in any way. And I think that they kind of get the idea that you're being completely upfront and honest about it. Other than that, eBay is pretty simple as far as being competitive, as long as your pricing isn't outrageous and you've got good feedback. So I don't know what your current status is. If you've had an account for a long time and you've got 99.9% feedback or something like that, that will certainly help you. Obviously, location is an issue because people want to buy things that are close to them. But if you have a new eBay account and you don't have a lot of feedback yet, here's kind of the strange thing about it. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily a good thing, but the fact of the matter is, if you go on eBay and buy a bunch of stuff, small dollar items, if you're just starting out and you want to have that feedback history, you can go on and make some purchases, leave feedback for the people that you're buying from, and then that will actually increase your feedback rating as well. So even though it's not necessarily things that you've sold, as long as you've had transactions taking place on eBay and the people that you're dealing with are happy and you don't have a lot of issues, that seems to help out. But I think the main thing in my experience is having good quality photos of your actual item that are high resolution, easy to see. We all have cameras on our phones now that are amazing, and if you have good lighting and there's nothing weird in the background, you don't see a dirty surface underneath it or anything like that, I think that instills more confidence in the buyer. That's probably the best tips that I can give you on that one. Everyone else, feel free to chime in on that. Speaking about drones, has anyone caught wind of what happened in Venezuela's supposed assassination attempt? Actually, yes, Johnny, we'll definitely be talking about that because that ties in with the drone article for sure. If you send me an email, what you're talking about, be glad to... Okay, sorry, that was for someone else, I think. Do as many photos as you can with a $1,000 Nikon. Okay, so I wonder, I can't imagine what would prevent you from selling, unless maybe you have a limited feedback history. Just a guess there. Mentioning in another chat that the supposed countermeasures that the security staff of any diplomatic service have to deploy a kind of jamming device to avoid those scenarios. Yeah, what price is it actually? Okay, good eBay advice there from everyone. So obviously we have other people on here who sell on eBay, so I hope that there's something here that will increase your sales. It does appear that something's shutting off. We're talking about an iPad Air 2 that Nate was working on and trying to figure out, why will it charge when it's on or when it's off? One of the two, right? It will charge until the Apple logo comes on, and if I can turn it off before it dies, it will continue to charge to about 7%, then get weird power fluctuations, which we thought sounded a lot like TriStar, but he's already switched out TriStar and the charge port. So have you already tried another battery? I know that's a silly question. It's probably obvious, but if you haven't, I would consider trying another battery also. There's so many different things in there that can cause that, those charging issues, but those are the main three, right? Let's see, we'll come back to that in just a second. iPhone 5S, 16 gig, unlocked, 8 out of 10 condition, no Touch ID. So something like that, Tyler, I would think that one, it's an iPhone 5S, which is, quite a few generations behind. I'm sure that people are still buying them. If it's an unlocked phone, this would be key. Number one, if it's an unlocked phone, you're definitely going to have better chances of getting it sold because a lot of people have concerns about phones being unlocked because they want to use them on various carriers. Unfortunately, the Touch ID, to me, I could care less, but a lot of people find that to be important, and that's unfortunate as well. Don't have one in to test battery for iPad Air 2. And I've run into the same problem, Nate. If, we guess and we start changing things out due to necessity, because if we don't have the parts that we need to swap things out, it's kind of like, well, where do I start? And I know it sucks, but even if you're not worried about selling the battery necessarily, you can probably pick one up online for like 15-20 bucks, I would think, and it would probably be worth having it just for testing purposes, if nothing else, if you don't end up selling it. Does gas gauge make sense for the iPad charging fix? Is that related? I don't know about that one, but if it was a gas gauge issue, then that would probably be something near the battery terminal that got knocked off. I'm assuming Nate's already checked that because he has a microscope in his shop. So definitely something to consider, though. Yeah, Tyler, I would say the only negatives on that, the no touch ID, like I said, a lot of people don't care, but a lot of people do apparently. And 5S is going back a little ways, so 16 gig. There's Swappa. There's also another website that I'm going to go blank on. I actually did an interview with one of their staff recently. Not parts. What is it called? Repair Traders. Take a look at repairtraders.com. You might also find someone interested there. But iPhone 5S, that's going back pretty far. So if you're competitively priced and that item is selling, then there certainly should be nothing about your specific listing that's holding you back, I wouldn't think, unless you're up against a lot of people who are sponsoring eBay listings. But that 5S doesn't seem like something they really would be going after. Anyways, let's get to this before we run out of time, as we often do. So obviously the big one here is the Galaxy Note 9 being announced. I know lots of people are excited about that, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because this is what everyone's talking about. So do we really need one more guy to go over the Galaxy Note 9? And we already pretty much know what to expect from it, but I thought there were some interesting highlights here just to go over briefly. This article, this is from The Verge, says Samsung is coming off a disappointing launch for its Galaxy S9, but that doesn't mean the company is shaking things up for its next major smartphone. I don't know if that's a typographical error or not, because if you're coming off of a disappointing launch, but that doesn't mean you're going to shake things up, I don't know what that means. Like, maybe it means they're not changing anything, or maybe it doesn't mean that, maybe what he meant to say is that the company is shaking things up. I don't know how to take that one. In any case, it has the best specs you'll find on any flagship Android phone. Not a big surprise, but good news. The screen's bigger, the S Pen has more tricks than ever before, and the battery is huge, which is great, right? This is what we really want, especially when you have a huge display to power up like that. You need a good battery. This one with 4,000 milliamp hours, so hopefully it's going to last a long time. They have gone through several different certifications to make sure that the battery is safe. Obviously, Samsung certainly doesn't want a repeat of the Note 7, so they've checked this thing 9 ways from Sunday to make sure that there's not going to be a problem, and they're prepared for the battery jokes already, is what it says in the article. So you'll have 2 versions to choose from. If you decide to get the Galaxy Note 9, there's a 128 gigabyte, 6 gig RAM model for $999. Top of the line, 512, 8 gigs of RAM for $1,250. So if you thought that Apple was at the top of the price point pile, if you want to call it that, well, Samsung's going to one-up them. Of course, when we see the iPhone 10 Plus or X Plus or whatever you like to call it, that one will probably cost more. That's just my guess. The rear fingerprint sensor, however, has been moved to the backside beneath the camera, which is interesting. I keep telling them they should put them on the lock button, but at least it's not down on the home button, which has always been, in my opinion, a very awkward place to have your fingerprint scanner. The water resistance, fast wireless charging, expandable micro SD storage, and the headphone jack all still there, which I think is good news for a lot of people. And in a phone that big, you'd have a hard time convincing anyone that you couldn't fit a headphone jack into the bottom of it anyways. For anyone who happens to care about, an old pair of headphones that are high quality, very expensive, and you don't want to have to buy another adapter to plug into, right? You can add a 512 gigabyte micro SD card into the 512 version, and you'll end up with a phone that has 1 terabyte of storage, which is more than the solid state drive on my computer, on my desktop computer. You'll have twice as much storage. That is so crazy to me. It does ship with Android 8.1 Oreo. Not a big surprise there either. We're kind of expecting that. And it will be available in blue, pink, and purple. I don't know why those particular colors. No black as of yet, which is interesting. The screen is 6.4 inches versus last year 6.3, so almost the same size, but it has shorter than the 8 because they have downsized the bezel slightly. So you actually get more screen area, but it's a shorter phone, which is, of course, good news for everyone. It uses a Super AMOLED Quad HD Plus screen. I don't think I can explain to you in 2 minutes what that is exactly. Again, the battery at 4,000 milliamp hours, and of course the Snapdragon 845 processor, which is pretty much the standard at this point. And there's a new water cooling system. Is it necessary? Is it going to help? Or is it a gimmick? I don't know the answer to those questions, but I think it's interesting that they're using this to talk about a water-cooled system inside of the phone, which also makes you think that that processor is probably going to run hot, especially when you're playing Fortnite, which is going to be supported on this device, first of all, Androids. So, big thing, crazy. Parents are actually now, in some cases, paying for their kids to have tutors improve their Fortnite game, because this is, the new thing, esports. This is what we're going to be looking at. You can get a Fortnite pre-order package with the phone, or a pair of AKG headphones, or you can pay an extra $100 and get both if that's your thing, of course. The Note 9 camera system is basically the same as the Galaxy S9 Plus. You get the two 12 megapixel cameras and the same dual aperture f1.5 or f2.4, and it does of course have optical image stabilization, which really should be the standard at this point, you would think. The scene optimizer mode can analyze the subject you're pointing the camera to and identify up to 20 different scenarios. So if you're pointing at food, people, landscapes, desktop, whatever it is, the phone employs its own sort of artificial intelligence to try to figure out what it is you're pointing at and adjust the camera settings accordingly, which is kind of cool, I guess. It also has a flaw detection feature built into the camera system that will let you know if a shot was blurry or if someone blinked, is what it says, which is also interesting. So these things are getting very sophisticated. If you're at the level where your camera can tell if one person in the picture blinks and say, hey, you need to take this over again, kind of cool and really impressive overall, I think. And I like that Samsung is finding some different features to focus on rather than saying, hey, here's how we can do the same thing that Apple did with their phone. We don't all need to have the same features and then just follow one company's idea of what you want in a smartphone. The S Pen can be used, we talked about this last week, as a remote shutter for the camera, which is cool. So you should set your camera up on a tripod and use your S Pen to make the camera shutter click. You can also use it as a side clicker during your lame PowerPoint presentation, like what I do. But, they work. I still use PowerPoint, I know, but they get the job done. Also, interesting thing about the S Pen, they use a built-in supercapacitor in order to rapid charge the S Pen. Now, obviously, the S Pen is very small, so the battery shouldn't have to take a whole lot to get it charged. But to make the process even faster, I hope that I'm understanding this correctly, you plug it in, and I would imagine that supercapacitor immediately charges up to its full potential and then trickle charges, or has a lower rate of charge going from there to the battery after you've already walked away from the charger, which is pretty cool. And you wonder if they won't start building some form of that into phones. I think the only thing is, though, if you've got a capacitor storing up huge amounts of energy like that, enough to transfer that and partially or fully charge a battery, then that's quite a bit of energy being stored in there in a not necessarily a stable environment. I mean, it's really a short-term storage, so it's not supposed to stay there, I wouldn't think, for too long. But then again, they used to put these things in TVs, and you would have to discharge them manually before you shocked yourself if you were working on it. So I don't know, but that's an interesting way to approach it. Those are most of the high points that I pulled out of this article that I thought were pretty cool about this. And again, the main thing here being that they're doing quite a few things differently. It's not, hey, we're gonna imitate Apple and make this phone exactly the same. So I am relieved to hear that. And this will probably be a very cool phone. I won't be buying one, at least not right away. But if Samsung wants to send me one, I'd be happy to test it out. Let me make sure that I didn't miss any of your relevant chat comments here, because this is why we're watching this thing, is to hear what you guys have to say. Let's see, let's back up here a second. If you are new on eBay, you're only visible to some buyers. Interesting, Nate. I did not know that. The more you sell and get good feedback, the more people will see your post. And again, if you buy things on eBay, that will contribute to your feedback rating as well. And, like I said, when I buy something from an eBay seller, I want to know what their seller reputation is. but I'm probably not going to go through a lot of steps to figure out, oh, does this person buy a lot of stuff, or are they only selling a lot of things? It's really only when they have a lower than say 90% feedback rating that I'll dig that far. And on eBay, you're so well protected anyways. You can return the item, you can dispute it with PayPal, you can do all sorts of stuff. So I don't know the answer, Tyler, but I would say, definitely get established. And once you have more of a history, you'll probably have an easier time of selling things. And the impression I get is that they'll also feature your items closer to the top of the search results if you've been on there and you've got a feedback rating and longer your account is. And you can also always spend a few dollars extra and sponsor or add a headline to your listing if that helps. But I'm not sure it's really worth the amount of money that you have to pay for that. The newer OLED displays burn faster. Well, that's not good news. Samsung is starting to look like the Russian athletes, all souped up with roids. Maybe so. I always doubt when they mention old hard. Oh, sorry. See, I'm butting into other people's conversations. It's hard to know who's talking to me and who's not. I need some advice. I'm trying now to enable the ad card to be able to store apps for a ZTE Z5 II phone, which come neutered out of the box for that feature. Does anybody has hints? Ooh, I hope they can help you, Johnny. I wouldn't have it for that one. Fortnite lags on the S8. I think the camera module has a firmware of its own. Okay, Samsung owns the iPhone 10 screen basically. Right. Oh, my landscapers are here, and I thought they were done with the backyard. So if it gets too noisy, I will have to take a break and go talk to them. But let's move on because it's already 20 after. Can you guys hear that? They were supposed to be here yesterday. Of course, they show up now in the middle of my stream. So hopefully you can hear me. If not, say something, and I'll go tell it. I don't want to tell them to stop working because it's like they're already a day late. But if it gets too loud, we'll have to do that. Hopefully, just bear with it for a minute, and they'll be finished. That's my plan. Why is this entire page blank, CNET? You're killing me. I don't know why they do this. I have an ad blocker, and then I lose everything, and now it's gone. Okay, so here we go. Let's go back up to the top. And the page is frozen now. That's nice. Okay, here we go. Come on. You can do it. You can do it. I don't know why this thing is so laggy. I'm going to have to switch out of Chrome. It keeps this up. So smart assistants are creating new openings for hackers. Not a huge surprise, really. If you think about it, the more technology we have, obviously the more people who are working to exploit that technology for their own personal gain, whether they're trying to pry into your information or blackmail you somehow or who knows what. But I'm going to butcher this guy's name. I'm going to call him Shulman. That's his last name. So he is a professor at the Technion Israel Institute of Technology, and he asked some of his students to find flaws in Cortana. And they did. They found ways to use the voice assistant on Windows in order to gain access to things that you wouldn't normally have access to. The problems included a potential hacker being able to take over a Windows device using only voice commands, and an exploit that could direct a computer to download malware even when it's locked. So if you've got Cortana turned on your Windows machine before the patch came out for this, and of course Microsoft knew nothing about it until people discovered that this was a potential problem. They patched it since then. I'm sure that they're going to find many other exploits here, and that's generally the way it goes. But someone could gain access to your computer even though it's locked using voice commands, and then of course tell it to go to whatever website and download all sorts of malware, and then they've got permanent access from everything from keyloggers to who knows what. Researchers expect that 55% of U.S. households will have a digital voice assistant of some sort by 2022. Mine won't be one of them, but a lot of people will. And that means that there are going to be all sorts of other actors trying to figure out how to exploit these things. Now, in April, I do not remember hearing about this, but back in April, researchers from a security testing firm called Checkmarks were able to develop an Alexa app known as a Skill. We've been hearing a lot about those lately. That allowed potential hackers to turn the Echo into a listening device. Again, do not remember hearing anything about this, but if the researchers figure it out and they contact the manufacturer or Amazon or whoever put the thing together and get it fixed, we may not hear about it until it's already not even a thing anymore. So I kind of assume that that's what happened. It probably made the news back then, but I don't remember that. Don't remember reading about it. Last September, researchers from China found that they could use a low frequency pitch to send commands to voice assistants that humans couldn't hear. So someone could actually send a... yes, it is a fire engine in the background, Johnny. You can still hear me, but it sounds like a weed eater. Okay, hold on a second, guys. I really hate to do this, but I got to tell them. All right, no more chainsaws in the backyard. Let's see. Sorry about that, everyone. These guys are supposed to be here yesterday, and then when they're not here, it's like, are they actually going to show up? So I don't want to discourage them, but what do? You know, it's hard to win. In any case, so there is low frequency sound that people can broadcast that your voice assistant can hear and you can't. So this puts a whole new twist on things. You know, someone can be attempting to hack into your voice assistant, and you wouldn't even be able to hear the voice commands that they're sending to it. There's another name that I'm probably going to ruin here. Candid, W-U-E-E-S-T. I really don't know how to pronounce that, but Candid is a principal threat researcher at Symantec and says that skills and actions are probably one of the most prevalent attack vectors we'll see, I assume in the near future. There are some that even rely on people being nice to their voice assistant. So check this out. If there was a game, for example, called Quiz, you can make your own game. So you can develop a game for that app market, wherever it happens to be, and you can call it Quiz Game Please. So that way, if someone goes to their voice assistant and they, instead of saying open the quiz, open quiz, if they say Quiz Game Please, now it would access a completely different application without that person knowing about it. And of course, once that app is open, it can cause your device to download malicious software, and who knows what happens after that, right? So there are going to be all sorts of different ways, creative ways for people to compromise these voice assistants, and I think we're going to be hearing a lot about that. It'll be they patch this and everything's fine, and then a couple months later, oh, did you know this has been happening the whole time, and how do we patch that? So definitely going to be a cat and mouse game like any other type of software. Even after Microsoft fixed the problem, Schulman said that he discovered again just by saying the commands differently. So when we had this thing where people were getting into Cortana, Microsoft thought they fixed it, but this team that Schulman was running figured out another way to get in anyway. So get used to hearing that a lot. That is my prediction. Let's see. Mike must be the big brother of the city mayor to be able to shoo away a fire engine. Dude, sorry about that. I don't know what to say. I'm going to have to tell these guys, to work around. I literally only do this for 2 hours out of the entire week. When do you think that they show up? You just have to be smart and composed when dealing with complicated troubleshooting. Oh, sorry. How would I, as a 17-year-old, get a job in cell phone repair? Tyler, I would think that you could get a work permit at 17 pretty much anywhere, probably younger than that, and look for a phone repair shop that would be willing to either train you on the job or would take you in as an intern. That would be my suggestion. Now, I know being an intern kind of sucks. You would want to get paid for your time. But at 17, I mean, you can work at, where do you live? I think, or what state are you in? Because I think you can work at 16 pretty much anywhere. And if anyone is doing phone repairs, and says that, oh, 17 is too young. I can tell you, real world, how old were you when you started working on phones? And I would trust him to work on any of my devices at this point. And he started a lot younger than that. So, Florida, yeah. So you shouldn't. I wouldn't think there would be any legal. The only potential problem there is if there's equipment that the state could have some problem with you operating at the age under the age of 18. So I do know that at least in California, if you had something as simple as a paper cutter, you cannot operate one of those if you're under the age of 18. So if you're trying to get into something like that would require you to use like a micro soldering equipment, you might have some trouble there because of the state laws. But yeah, real world started out as 13. And if anyone who's in phone repair doesn't realize that probably to a certain extent, the younger person is, the faster they're going to pick this stuff up, the more they're going to understand as far as the software side of it goes, then they're out of their minds. So unless they have some other reason not to hire you, I can't imagine that not being a good deal for them. But that would be my suggestion, go into some, almost every phone repair store that you see is going to be privately owned. Go and talk to the people, walk in there. Find out, talk to the employees too. This is one mistake that I see that people make in job searching and in marketing all the time. If you think, hey, this would be a place that I'd like to sell my products to or my services to, or I would like to work here, don't ignore the employees. The first person that you see when you walk in, introduce yourself, tell them what you're looking for, ask them who you should be talking to and I'm not saying treat them like they're the boss, but treat them like they're an important person, in whatever capacity is that they are inside the store. And you'll usually find that whoever they refer you to is going to be a lot more receptive, because they're going to say, hey, this guy came in, he was really cool, he was asking questions about work, what can we do for him? And pound the pavement. You could probably go online and email a lot of shops at the same time. That would be more efficient. But if you're good with talking to people face to face and you walk in and tell them what you want to do, I know at least one business that hired a guy as a technician just because he kept showing up and saying, hey, I think I can do what you guys are doing. Can I hang out here and watch a little bit and check it out and see if it's for me? And you'll probably find that people are receptive to that, especially because you don't have to generally deal with the corporate structure that you would for most jobs. Even if you wanted to work in something silly like fast food, you have to go to the manager, and the manager has to go to corporate, and they tell you to go online and take some survey and apply and stuff like that. With small businesses, that's pretty rare. You can usually walk in, especially if it's like a sole proprietorship, and just say, hi, my name's Tyler. How are you doing? I'm very interested in working on phones. I've been messing around with stuff at home, and I'd like to get into this. Do you have can I work part-time here or watch you guys for a while and see what you do? And you'll probably find people that are receptive to that, I would think. 8 months of fast food experience and 5 years experience on fixing phones. Well, there you go, man. If you have 5 years experience fixing phones, if someone came to me and I was hiring in my shop, which we almost should constantly be doing, because you never know if someone's going to have to go out of town, if they're going to find another job, whatever else is going to happen. You should certainly have some alternates on hand. But if somebody approached me and said, hey, I've been working on phones for 5 years, I would probably hand them one of the phones that I have behind the counter and say, okay, tear this down, put it back together, and if everything works, you pass the application process. That would be, or part of the application process. In any case, that's my take on it. Tyler is another prodigy like Louis Rossman. You never know, man. You never know. So on this note, Johnny, you had asked about this. I think this is the one. Nope, it's going to be right after this. We'll get to it. So first of all, do you recognize this? I think this is a picture from a movie. It might be Hackers. I don't know. But look, that is Angelina Jolie looking a little like Spock's daughter there, second from the right. And the guy on the far right, I have no idea why he's brushing his teeth, but this is the image that they chose. In any case, these guys are after your smartphone, apparently, whatever that means. So there are vulnerabilities that leave devices. These are phones in the U.S. You saw the headline here, right? Homeland Security finds vulnerabilities on millions of U.S. iPhones. With that in mind, here's what else we know. These vulnerabilities reportedly leave devices open to possible attacks by hackers. That's bad and cause for concern. Unfortunately, it's not clear yet which handsets contain these alleged vulnerabilities. So, what? All they said is that your phone might be vulnerable, or it might not. We don't know which phones they are. Like, could you be a little more vague with this? The vulnerabilities make it possible to escalate privileges and take over the device. Well, that's not good. It's not clear whether these vulnerabilities have already been exploited or just potentially could be. So I don't, this is Cult of Mac, which may be somewhat, biased as far as phone manufacturers go, but they tend to have relatively reliable articles. So I don't know why they put this out there. I don't think it's just a pure clickbait title, but more details will be available soon. Researchers will announce more details about the flaws later this week, probably right after Samsung launches starts selling the Galaxy Note 9. That is my guess. And they'll probably say that one was affected and they didn't want them to fix it beforehand. I don't know. But I'm still just laughing at this picture because why does the guy have a toothbrush in it? I can't figure it out. Let's see. So this is the one, I think, Johnny, that I really fits into what you're saying. And this goes along with that whole thing, the attempt or the alleged attempt of assassination on the Venezuelan president, I think it was. And interestingly enough, I've been reading a lot about that event, and people from Venezuela who have responded to that, because obviously this guy has not been, depending on who you listen to, not doing a lot of good things for his own country, and things are pretty bad over there right now. The interesting thing is that Venezuelans that I've seen write comments about him, about this assassination attempt, are saying that if he were assassinated, the guy that would take over for him apparently would be much worse. So I don't know if that's the case or not, but that is what I read from more than one source. The Army buying microwave cannons to take down drones mid-flight. Well, we knew that for quite a while, opposing forces have been using drones for military engagements, right? So that's a cause for concern. Obviously, you don't want someone to fly over you with a hand grenade and be able to drop it that easily. The high-powered microwave system would be mounted to an aircraft. So these are actually microwave cannons that you mount onto an airplane so that when they encounter one of these drones, I guess they shoot at it and knock it out of the air. Let's see what it says. Last Friday, the agency announced its intention, this is the U.S. Army, intention to purchase an airborne high-powered microwave system from Lockheed Martin, which is intended for use against drones, to be mounted on an airplane. So first thing that came to mind for me was someone standing on the ground holding something that looked like a big bazooka, and aiming at drones. But in fact, this is a permanent wing mount mechanism. In the wake of an apparent assassination attempt against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro that was carried out by a pair of hexacopter drones rigged with remote triggered explosives. And supposedly the drones that they used for that attempted assassination were similar to DJI's Matrix 600, which I couldn't tell you much about because I don't know drones that well. Have to ask the everyday dad about that one. In the Maduro case, Venezuelan security forces simply shot the drones out of the sky with rifles, causing the craft to either explode or plummet to the ground, which could, obviously if someone is attempting an assassination, you'll have to do whatever is necessary to prevent that from happening if that's your job. I mean, we know that Secret Service people are sworn to put themselves between a bullet and the president or, whoever it is that they're supposed to be protecting. So we understand that. Shooting rifles into the air in public places, to me, seems like there might be a better option. That could cause some problems, obviously. So most drones can be neutralized with targeted radio jamming, which causes the craft to lose its connection with the pilot and hover to the ground, which seems like that would be a much safer option, just to basically disable it. If you start shooting at things that are rigged with explosives, it seems like the results could be really, highly unpredictable. You don't know what they're carrying. Other agencies have trained hawks to take down the drones in mid-flight. Yeah, let me read that again. Other agencies have trained hawks to take down drones in mid-flight, although the tactic remains controversial and has not been widely adopted. I'm sure PETA is not happy with that. If you have hawks that are going after drones which are rigged with explosives, where do they fly after they, if they intercept these drones? where do they take them? Do they disable them in the air and then they fall to the ground and blow up there? Like, I really don't know the details on that. They're kind of sketchy. But interestingly enough, I just heard a podcast the other day where they were saying that during Genghis Khan's reign in Asia, that they were using, as they went across parts of the Middle East and Europe, invading all these different areas, that at some point they had trained hawks to hunt wolves, which I thought was really crazy. Like, how do you even train a hawk in the first place? But I guess if you can train a hawk to hunt a wolf, you should be able to train it to hunt a drone, I suppose. So that's kind of weird. Sounds like they needed to make an article, but I don't know any information about hacking. Why don't they just hack the drone? That was my thought. In fact, I swear I had read a while back that there was technology that would allow you to basically hijack a drone. So this is something that I thought that the military and law enforcement would already be using. When you encounter a drone that has, potentially malicious actions, about to take place, that you should be able to basically hijack, take over remote control of that drone and fly it to a safer place. That seems like it will be the safest thing to do. I've seen birds take down drones. They just attack it in the air and let it fall to its death. Okay, that's great. I hope that they don't do that if the thing's rigged with C4, which is what it sounds like these two in Venezuela were. If I remember correctly, they were saying that these things have a payload of 5.5 kilograms, and allegedly the ones in Venezuela had a kilogram of C4 explosives. So I assume that if you don't trigger it, if it just falls to the ground, it's not just going to blow up on its own. But if someone is controlling the drone, they see that it's being intercepted, they might cause it to explode at that point anyways, you would think. I don't know. Okay, so do they actually shoot a drone down? I saw a news story indicating the explosion was in a nearby apartment building. Yeah, I don't know, Greg. As far as I can tell, at least according to this article and a couple of the ones I've read, it says that they shot it down. It also said that they had tried to mislead the media and tell people that it was an explosion in an apartment building, and then other people say that they just saw an explosion and assumed that it came from an apartment building. As far as I know, everything that I've read points to this, that they actually shot the drones out of the sky and then they exploded, which again, this is a cause for concern. You don't want it to reach its target, but you've got to keep in mind, what else it's going to explode next to or onto at the same time. So, yeah. Johnny, you had said something about this at the opening. I'm trying to remember what your comment was or what the question was. Speaking of drones, anyone caught wind of what happened in Venezuela? Yeah. So that's as much as I know. If you guys have any new info, feel free to share it. But yeah, pretty crazy that if you think, a year or 5 years or 10 years in the future, this is going to be probably a lot more common than just this one, unusual story that we hear about, because we're seeing so many drones now, and they're becoming more sophisticated, faster. They're going to be able to carry more weight. They're going to have longer range. They're going to have bigger batteries. I mean, it's going to get pretty crazy, I think. They were also pointing fingers to neighboring Colombia as source of the attack. Interesting. Yeah, it's so hard to tell, right? I mean, unless they catch whoever was behind the assassination attempt, A, and B, as long as they don't find someone to use as a scapegoat, as has happened throughout history. They say, well, we need to make this case look like it was solved, so we're going to pin it on this group or this person or whatever. So if no one comes forward and claims responsibility, and they don't find out with conclusive evidence who was really behind this, it's hard to say. It could be Colombia, it could be I think there was a group in Venezuela who they think had something to do with it, but that whole area right now, it's really sad. I've seen some pictures of like stores and how people are starving and just, bad news all around. So that's when crazy things start to happen, obviously. I want to get to this before we finish because we've only got about 17 minutes left, but as I mentioned in the beginning, and we've had this come up occasionally, but it looks like Metalhead will be available for sale next year. So you've seen these Boston Dynamic robots that can run and jump and do flips and all sorts of crazy stuff. Well, there is a video, and I've got the article linked in the video description down here in the bottom. And if you go through here, there's actually a video embedded into the article. Unfortunately, I can't play it on YouTube without permission. And I have tried to contact Boston Dynamics more than once, and they have not responded to me. So I'm sure there are lots of people who are interested in talking to them and interviewing them and so forth, but they're a little too busy for that, I guess. In any case, so I can always say that they did not respond to my comments, right? So this thing runs around stage, goes sideways. It doesn't really jump up and down, but it does have an arm that'll come out and grab things. It can hold something inside of this robotic arm, and the rest of the little dog robot can move around while it's keeping the arm stable so it stays in one place. So it's quite interesting the way this thing works. Founder Mark Raybert says that the company's dog-like Spot Mini robot is in pre-production and preparing for commercial availability in 2019. I don't know why you would want one of these. You know, outside of the novelty of having a robotic dog, why would you want this? Number one. Secondly, my first question is, how far can this thing go before you have to recharge it? And apparently at this point, we're talking about 90 minutes. So you have a robotic dog that can walk, it can go up and down stairs, it can grab things in its arm, it can walk sideways and backwards. It has cameras mounted on the front, on the back, and on the side, so it sees everything. It can differentiate between obstacles that it's not supposed to come into contact with. So this is a fairly sophisticated little robot dog here, but outside of just having one for entertainment purposes, I don't know what purpose it would serve, and also, you know, where this is going, where it's going to end up. So obviously in the future they'll want to work on things like having a battery that lasts a little bit longer. Beyond that, they have been able to reduce, actually I'll get to this in just a second. The Spot Mini robot is one that is motivated by thinking about what could go in an office in a space more accessible for business applications, and then the home eventually. Why, again, why? I don't know. On its website, Boston Dynamics highlights that Spot Mini is the quietest robot they have built. The device weighs around 66 pounds, so you can still throw it across the room, theoretically, and can operate for about 90 minutes on a charge. They're not ready to talk about a price tag yet, but they detailed that the latest Spot Mini prototype costs 10 times less to build than the iteration before it. So if we took a wild guess and said that the previous generation was some ridiculous price tag, like let's say 50 grand, and they can now build one for 5,000, you know, we're still not going to see a lot of them, but I don't really know exactly what type of price point we're talking about. Obviously, it would be cool to have a mechanical watchdog that could kind of guard your house, but at the same time, you know, if it has any potential to not just warn you of an intruder or something like that, but do some sort of physical damage, that's when we have to start wondering about how we make sure that these things are controlled properly. And just coming out of that article, you know, a couple steps back here, where we talk about people being able to hack into voice-controlled assistants. This is what I'm always thinking about. Let's take these 2 or 3 different pieces of technology and try to imagine what happens if they all combine at some point, which they do. They always do. So if you've got a robotic dog that right now you can control through your smartphone or your tablet, I assume that eventually it will recognize voice commands if it doesn't already. And that would be the point in time where I would start wondering if we have to be concerned that a robot dog that can be controlled by your voice cannot be hacked into by someone else who can start to issue it commands. And even at this point, if they can get onto your network, and by the way, we just found out that apparently there's a new type of vulnerability in WPA3 that is has made hacking into Wi-Fi systems trivial. Like, anyone can do it. It doesn't matter how complex your password is. That's in another 10-minute article that we could go into, but you know, these things happen. So if someone hacks into your robot dog, then what? You know, is there a safety shutoff switch for that thing? I don't know. Don't let it get hacked. That's great advice, Tyler. That would be the obvious, but you know, there's only so much you can do, right? People are constantly trying to figure out ways to exploit wireless networks, smart cars, smart devices, all sorts of stuff, phones and tablets, not to be mentioned, computers. Someone will find a way in. There's always a way to get there, and then we have to have knowledge of that for it to be patched, and then they work on another way in. So it's always, I think it's going to be a perpetual at least potential for things to go wrong with these. Electronic guard dog sits on porch with wireless charger. When in action, it has 90 minutes of life and a taser. Yeah, seriously. I know you're kind of joking, Nate, but all kidding aside, if you had a robotic dog sitting on your porch, you would want to make sure that it made a good watchdog, right? Or that it could keep at least wild animals away from your house if you're living out in, somewhere where that's a problem, or raccoons, or we have all sorts of stuff around here. And I'm in a city where we have groups of raccoons that show up, and then we have possums and all sorts of stuff. So you would want this dog to at least be able to scare things away, right? If it's got a taser on it, yeah, that brings it to a whole new level of how do we approach this? What are the ethics surrounding a robotic dog like this, or a robotic anything? What rules govern this? Who gets to have them? What can they do with them? How do you make sure that they don't go chasing kids down the street, or biting your neighbor, or who knows what, or someone hijacking it? I'd buy one. No need to clean up. That's a good point. You don't have to feed them. You just have to charge them, and there's no shedding of hair. There's no cleaning up poop in the yard. It does offer some advantages, and they probably live a lot longer as long as you change the battery out. They probably live longer than we will. If they hack it to kill people, movies will be like real life. That's the thing that I'm wondering about. You would have to put the robot dog down, I guess. That's kind of sad and funny at the same time. I mean, at least it's not a real dog, right? If you have to put a robotic dog down, then you got to do what you got to do. But this is something we're going to be seeing, people with robotic dogs, which is crazy. So this company was founded in 1992. Get this. After being spun out of MIT and had a brief stint in Alphabet Corporation. The company was purchased by SoftBank last year, which is a Japanese telecom company, last time I checked. So this is another interesting part of this article. This is a Japanese-owned company that is, in some capacity, at least part or full owner of this whole thing, I would imagine. Pretty weird. So we'll have to see where this goes. But robot dog nightmares will commence next year, apparently. All right, so let's. I got one more on here, and this is somewhat tech related, but not as much as the rest of the stuff we talked about, because I think this is just crazy. I don't understand why this happens. We all kind of thought that now that we have the internet, people have virtually instantaneous access to accurate information. At least that was the plan. And what happened? Well, all sorts of people started getting their news from social media, and not so reputable news sites, and all sorts of little niche conspirator, if you want to call them. Alex Jones back on iTunes, by the way, which I think is hilarious. First, before I get into this, if you listen to Alex Jones, and I've listened to him before, mainly for entertainment, he's a bit out there, right? And the crazy thing, in my humble opinion, about Alex Jones is that he is right about a few things. So when you do that, and then you start to mix in these outrageous ideas, you get a certain number of people who buy into everything. And we have the same problem with people like Rush Limbaugh, and like, what's the guy that wants to debate that? He wants to debate a politician right now. I'm going to go blank on his name right now, but he's a very well-spoken, very confident person, but a lot of what he says is not true. And it's sad, because people start to believe what they hear because of the source, because they build a name for themselves, and they go, oh, well, I believe everything they say now. Ben Shapiro is one of them. He's a very intelligent guy. He's right about a lot of things, but he's also wrong, and he's also inaccurate about quite a few things. But there's a large group of people that believe everything that he says, and that is unfortunate and scary. So instead of looking things up for themselves, they just go along with it. I think that Alex Jones has accidentally done something brilliant, and that is to bring lots of press coverage to his show, getting banned and then put back on iTunes. All he's done is grown his audience, because now more people have heard about him and who he is, and they're going to be listening. Again, whether it's out of entertainment or they really believe everything that he's saying or whatever it is, he's got some wacky ideas. So Apple has come out and said, we think that everyone should have a voice, which I agree with to a certain extent, but you would hope that people would use some discretion before buying into all this information that they're reading. But whatever. Let's back up here. Japan is trying to start a cyber war. Yeah, maybe. Pearl Harbor is all over again, except robots on people. That would be scary. Alex Jones is a gatekeeper and part of the deception. Alex Jones, he is a character, I'll say that. As well as some highly smart people I know from college times who were reputable professors and in the third backed the dictatorship going to Venezuela. Oh, in the end, back the yeah. So this is the crazy thing, and it blows my mind because you can look at lots of politicians, religious leaders, celebrities. I mean, you name it, and they say a few things that make sense and that are accurate, and then people start believing everything they say, or they're a fan. They happen to like that person. I'll give you a great example related to, where is it? This article right here. A lot of people like Jim Carrey. He's a great actor. He's funny. But when he started on this anti-vax stuff, people started saying, "Oh, Jim Carrey believes in it," And what is his wife's name? I can't even think of it right now. But this is really scary. So doctors are furious at Italy's populist government for approving a dangerous anti-vax law. How do you have anti-vax laws in this day and age? It boggles the mind. The country's new populist government approved its first piece of anti-vax legislation last week. I don't even understand how those words get into the same sentence, not to mention paragraph or page. Anti-vax legislation? Are you kidding me? In a Senate vote, lawmakers from the governing Five Star Movement and Liga voted to postpone the introduction of a law passed by the previous government that required children to be vaccinated for 10 diseases, including measles, in order to enroll in a creche or kindergarten. Measles in Italy, that has seen a number of cases leap from 870 in 2016 to more than 5,000 last year, with 4 fatalities, because we've got this anti-vax bandwagon which really wants to make me bang my head against a wall. If it's bad enough if you want to Darwin your children out of existence, I mean, that's a terrible thing. If you're going to put your own children at risk of deadly diseases, that in and of itself is bad enough. But if you want to send those kids to school with other kids who can potentially contract these diseases from the unvaccinated ones that you sent there, this is a real problem. That should be a crime right there, okay? It should be a crime to do it to your own children. It should be an even worse crime to do it to the rest of the population's children. I can't believe this is happening. Despite the deadly outbreak, the coalition government that came into power in June has been pandering to Italy's powerful anti-vax movement. So basically, like anywhere else in the world, the people who are running for office see a group of people who think, hey, here's what we want. And they go, well, if I'm going to get elected, I need to support this crazy idea. And there you have it. The repeal, which still needs to be approved by Italy's lower house, has drawn a furious response from the medical establishment, rightly so, as well as regional governors who say any move to allow unvaccinated children to attend school will jeopardize public health. Duh. And what is the guy's name? Roberto Burioni, a professor of microbiology and virology at Milan's Vita Salute University San Raffaele, said that by supporting the repeal, Italy senators have jeopardized the health of the weakest and most defenseless children in order to ingratiate themselves with the most ignorant, selfish part of the country. Not to mention probably not the most intelligent part of the country. Hating compulsory vaccinations to surrender to the no vaccination lobby sends us right back to the Middle Ages, said Stefano Bonaccini, the governor of Emilia-Romagna. Now, okay, those are all the attempts at Italian pronunciations that I can make. I hope I didn't butcher those too bad. But this is just nuts. It's bad enough that we have this anti-vax thing going here, but to see the number of children who are getting sick from this, I don't get it. I don't understand. Is anti-vax really child abuse? In my opinion, if you're asking opinions, yes, I think so. It should be. There should definitely be some sort of laws that. God, I just saw a news article yesterday of a Christian Scientist couple who decided to withhold medical treatment from their sick infant because they don't believe in hospitals, they believe in prayer. And, if your kid's dying and he needs medical attention, maybe your God's plan is for you to take him to the hospital. Maybe that's why he allowed doctors to learn how to treat children. But they decided to withhold medical attention from their child because they don't believe in modern medicine. Meanwhile, the kid dies. The father is sitting in the courtroom when the sentence is read because they were charged with, I don't know if it was manslaughter or murder. It was one of the two. And he is in shock when they handed down the sentence. And the irony on top of that whole thing is that he's wearing prescription glasses in the courtroom. So the parent who believes that you should withhold modern medical treatment from your kids, because that's not part of God's plan, is wearing a pair of prescription lenses. Like, you don't put that together. This is frustrating. Like, I just don't believe this. It's nutty. Has anyone catch wind about the country of Catalonia in Spain who proposed to sell non-pasteurized milk just to tickle the condemnation of the EU? No, I have not heard about that one. I understand your point, but if you are vaccinated, doesn't that make you immune, and don't you need to worry about someone that isn't? I am immune from chickenpox and don't worry about being exposed again. Not exactly, Nate. So I won't be able to explain this properly, but long story short is that there are vaccinations. Number one, chickenpox is one of them where you can get it twice. I've had chickenpox twice so far. There's another potential if you don't, I guess, get chickenpox severely enough that you can, as an adult, later on develop shingles. I think that those two are related. But the problem is that there are children in these schools that are not at a sufficient age to be vaccinated, and they're being grouped together with the other kids. Or how did this work? I'm going to have to read up on the science behind it, but the bottom line is that these kids that aren't vaccinated can actually spread it to other children who either have already been vaccinated and haven't gone through a sufficient amount of time to develop an immunity, or they're also being grouped in with kids who haven't or who are too young to be vaccinated, something along those lines. So there's a real problem with doing this, with having your kids unvaccinated and sending them into schools. I apologize for not having all of that information because I don't know all of the details, but I know that this is something that happens. I'm going to definitely look that up because I hate not having the answer myself. But you can't just assume that because you're practicing vaccination with your children that makes them safe to have around unvaccinated kids. This is the way that I understand it. This is called the reemergence of the Darwin Award. Exactly. There's a minimum age that one can be vaccinated for some diseases. Those children can be infected. Thank you, Greg. So that was part of the problem, Nate, is that they're saying that kids that aren't old enough to be vaccinated should only be around other kids who are old enough to have already been vaccinated. Otherwise, you raise the chances of them contracting these diseases, exponentially. And they're already seeing this happen. This is a real thing. Their rate of measles in Italy is like ridiculous compared to the rate here. Let's see. Check this out. In 2016, Italy's rate of measles vaccine coverage was estimated at 83%, well below the World Health Organization's recommended 95% for herd immunity. So you also want to have a certain percentage of the population vaccinated in order to slow down the growth of the disease or infection. I'll have to get more details on that for you, but there are good arguments, good reasons for why if someone insists on not vaccinating their child and they're allowed to make that decision, you don't want your kids around them either. Those children can be infected by children that are older but have not been vaccinated. Galaxy Note 9 only explodes. It breaks 5,000 times easier to buy it. What? Not only explodes, it breaks 5,000 times. All right, so it is 7 o'clock, so it is time for me to get out of here. I'm going to shut this right here. I'm going to take off. Next week, I will definitely be doing a live stream Monday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Next Thursday, I'm not sure. I have training next week, and it looks like maybe the facility I'm going to be in will have a sufficient upstream speed so that I can live stream immediately after the training ends, because I go from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So at 6 p.m., I've got to jump on YouTube. So I'm going to try to make that happen. I'll probably do a test stream earlier in the day, make sure that it's working, and if not, then I might postpone next week's to a little bit later. That is the plan. Thank you all so much for joining me. If a kid catches something he was vaccinated for, doesn't that mean it doesn't work? Nate, I'm going to have to get the details for you on that. I read it and I didn't fully absorb it enough that I could repeat it back, but the way that it was presented scientifically, it made sense. But I don't want to leave anyone hanging and be one of those people who gives you part of the story and then I don't know what I'm talking about the rest of the time. So I'm going to look that up and I will address it again next Monday as soon as I get back. Thank you all so much for watching and joining me. I will talk to you next time. Have a great rest of the week.